Good morning, everyone. I'm calling this meeting to order at 9:31 a.m. I'm Lauren Boucher from Park Ridge, along with our Vice Chair Tammy and our Secretary Kim and Rachel, our CCS Technical Group Liaison. We'll all be monitoring the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand to speak, we'll do our best to see that you're heard. Also, a quick reminder that we won't be meeting again until February 15th of 2023. Okay, so let's move on. Are there any revisions or additions to the August 17th, 2022 minutes? Okay, seeing none. The minutes are approved as written. Are there any additions to the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our first guest speaker, Dr. Pamela Thomas, who's here to talk to us today about cataloging maintenance center services. Good morning,
Thanks,
Pamela.
Lauren. Hi, you can call me Pam.
Okay.
All right. And once I share my screen, I'm going to ask you guys if you can see the notes or not, because that's the fun part of sharing your screen. Okay, so do you see just the title slide or the title slide with the next slide? Or can you not see the screen?
I am seeing your entire
okay, so I just need to switch. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that better?
That's great.
Okay. All right. I'm just gonna force my mouse up there. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I am Pam Thomas from the Cataloging Maintenance Center, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the Cataloging Maintenance Center can do for CCS and what we do for all libraries in Illinois. Okay, so here's today's agenda. I'm going to provide a brief introduction about the CMC, criteria and guidelines, introduce you to the CMC team along with contact information, and then provide a brief summary. And then I'll also take questions at the end of the presentation. So the CMC has basically been in existence since 2001. It's funded through the state library. The mission of the Cataloging Maintenance Center, or CMC, is to provide cataloging support to Illinois Library System members, which means that the CMC offers free cataloging services to all libraries in Illinois, even standalone libraries. So what is our criteria? So the requesting library must be a library system member, and many standalone libraries are for resource sharing purposes. Illinois Heartland Library System, or IHLS, reaching across the Illinois Library System, Rails, or Chicago Public Library, CPL system. Eligible collections for original or copy cataloging include local authors, genealogy, local history, and special collections. And special collections is defined by your library. For example, you might have a collection of community cookbooks, government documents, world languages, etc. Eligible collections of material in most modern world languages can be accommodated, and we can also catalog Braille materials. I realize that Braille is not a language, but we do have experience cataloging Braille items. Local publishers are not eligible for free cataloging. The CMC provides training using Moodle on the Share Training website. We currently offer courses on cataloging 3D objects, kits, and realia, subject analysis, cataloging basics, RDA book training, and RDA video and audio recordings training. And we also present monthly webinars online with the CMC from August through May. In this fiscal year, we are covering topics from book repair to digitizing photos and everything in between. Also, is your database full of minimal records or missing OCLC numbers? Then the CMC staff can help. You can email the CMC at cmc@illinoisheartland.org to discuss your database cleanup project. The CMC has enhanced or identified bibliographic record merges in more than 17,000 records for the Prairie Cat cleanup project. And I'll discuss the consortium of academic and research libraries in Illinois, or CARLI, cleanup project in a few minutes. Those are our two big database cleanup projects we're working on. Sorry, I need a drink. So let's talk about the guidelines. So you can contact the CMC to determine if your item or items are eligible for free cataloging. When sending items through delivery, please provide contact information and make sure your items are identified or property stamped for your location. Ship all items marked with the current ILDS label. And what library classification would you like added to the OCLC record? That's important information that we need. Put that information in the notes section on the ILDS label. You can send one item or as many items that will fit in a box. The box should not weigh more than 40 pounds. I kind of prefer less than 30 personally if I have to lift it. In some circumstances, CMC staff may be able to visit your library to complete cataloging. Travel by CMC staff will be on a limited basis, depending on several factors, such as availability of staff, distance to the library, size of the collection to be cataloged, condition of the collection, etc. We do require Wi-Fi capability because that's important for us to get our work done. Items will be cataloged in the order they're received, with turnaround time varying depending on the scope of the project and other factors. Most items will be returned within 30 days. Our current turnaround time is 2 weeks. However, if you have an item that needs to be cataloged quickly, just add rush to the notes section on the ILDS label, and we will catalog your item right away. CMC staff will create an original bibliographic record in OCLC, or will supply an existing OCLC record. An export file of bibliographic records will be sent to your library to import into your local catalog or database in a .dat format. CMC staff will not create item or holding records for individual copies. When sending items written by local authors, please provide information about the author's relationship to the state of Illinois, current or previous resident of Illinois, works or worked in Illinois, etc., and any other pertinent information, since the majority of the CMC staff can also create name authority records in OCLC, and any and all information is helpful. Yay, okay. So now it's time to meet our team. Oops, hopefully the pictures will show up. Oh, well, so we have Barb Scobie. She's our cataloger in Edwardsville. Eric McKinney and Mary Cornell are our catalogers in Champaign. And then I am the bibliographic grant manager, and I'm also in Champaign. We just finished interviewing for a metadata cataloger who will start in early December. Sorry about the photos, guys. Okay, and here's our contact information if you need to contact any of us, or like I mentioned earlier, we have a general email, thecmc@illinoisheartland.org. And sorry, it looks like I have a capital I in mine. It should be a lowercase. And Rachel also has these slides if you need this. Oh, so it doesn't like any of our pictures. Okay, so Katie, Blake, and Bonnie are our full-time temporary special project catalogers working on the Alma Cleanup project. In September 2021, the CMC hired 3 temporary full-time catalogers to merge, edit, update, and or delete duplicate records in the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries in Illinois, or CARLI database. To date, 25,862 bibliographic records have been edited, 2,951,376 records have been deleted, and 174,269 records have been merged. And we just finished interviews for a new special project cataloger, Bonnie. This was her last day today. So we're going to have the new special project cataloger starting later this month, hopefully. So, okay. So in summary, if an item fits the criteria, local author, local history, local genealogy, or special collection, then the CMC will catalog your items for free. And again, the special collection is determined by your library. We do quite a bit of world language materials, but if you just purchase like one book in Polish or one book in German, one book in Russian, that would not fit. It needs to be part of a special collection. Okay, so thank you. And there is my contact information. as well as the CMC and our website. And now any questions? I will stop sharing if I can force my mouse down there. Okay. No questions?
Well, thank you, Pam. Oh,
Oops.
wait,
No, just you don't have to send a minimum of boxes. If you, but if you have, like hundreds of items, maybe contact us first. But you can definitely send more than one tub. Just be considerate about how much it weighs. Most of our drivers are retired. And, I don't like lifting more than 30 pounds my own self. Just saying. So like I said, usually Kathy asked how quickly are the items cataloged and returned. Usually within 30 days, but right now our turnaround time has been 2 weeks. Yes, Karen, you could send a couple of books. They're in another language if you needed help, as long as you said it was part of a special collection. Mm-hmm.
all right. Are there any other questions? Well, I don't see any, so thank you very much, Pam. And
Most modern languages, we've done a lot of Arabic and Korean recently. We've done Russian, German, Chinese, Polish, so really almost any language. Did you want me to stick around for a few minutes or?
sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We don't have any more questions for Pam. Why don't we move on to Megan O'Keefe's presentation on reclassifying 300s and 900s at Algonquin.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so Rachel was kind enough to invite me to join all of you today to talk about a project that I actually did at my last library. But I'm now at Algonquin, and I know we've kind of taken this approach here as well. And actually our cataloging librarian is in the meeting if anyone had any specific questions for her too. But I wanted to talk about, just how I had noticed a problem in terms of history items and how they are default covered in the Dewey Decimal System. So these are all books that you can see that were originally in the 300s at my last library. And most of them literally have history in the title. So it always struck me as odd that, they were not in the history section. And so I started to kind of focus on, well, why is it that these items are over in the 300s instead of in with the rest of the history items? And you might notice that the types of books that are being left out of history seem to be covering women's history, African-American history, LGBTQ plus history, immigrant history, really just anything that is not Western, white, male, cisgendered history kind of is in different areas of the collection. So why does that matter? Well, first of all, as catalogers, I'm sure everyone would agree that, everybody wants things to be accurate. So if you're focusing on cataloging, you want the actual cataloging numbers and the way it's organized to be an accurate way to organize the collection. But also, by not keeping these in the history area, this kind of conveys that this isn't history. So then people think the only history that matters that they have to focus on is very male focused, is white centric, is Western European or American. And it leaves a lot of other groups and cultures out of what is considered history and what is worth paying attention to for history readers. So it kind of others it and makes it seem like it's only something that people focused in those niche areas need to pay attention to. So by putting it in the history collection, then, you know, it's more inclusive, it's more equitable. It makes sure that we have diverse perspectives and stories all being recognized there. And I found when we moved them, it also helped things circulate better because the history readers were finding more history books. And then it helped me able to order more diversely in that section as well, which was nice. I also know that a lot of times when talking to people who are cataloging, you know, everyone wants to kind of follow the rules and make sure that everything is consistent and not, you know, maybe rock the boat too much. So I just like to point out that there are people who tried, you know, to correct these problems before. Nella Larson, who also wrote the book Passing, if anybody read that, was a librarian who moved slavery books over into history. She moved them from the 300s to the 900s. Dorothy Porter was a university library, a Howard University librarian who moved migration and colonization books from the 300s over to the 900s. And Jesta Corsi Hines worked on a project with her students to move LGBTQ history and Black history books over to the 900s. She also actually took an approach where she used a lot of natural language. That seems viable, but it is a way bigger project because you'll have to kind of create a whole new system. So when I was correcting things, I just stuck to finding better call numbers for being able to move things over. So when I got started, I originally just kind of looked at the area and tried to figure out, you know, what it was that we were needing to correct. And it was clear that in this project, it was going to be doing an audit of the 300s, figuring out what to move and moving them over into history. When I went to get approval, I made a point to not need to go too high up the chain just because I know that can slow things down. So I was able to kind of just go to my manager with a simple proposal that I submitted. It was approved with her in the administration. We didn't even need to go to the board. You know, obviously every organization is different, but I would definitely recommend if you're looking to do this, you know, going to the lowest level authority you can to get approval. This is the sample of the proposal I submitted. If anybody wants it, I'm happy to share, you know, if that would be helpful. But basically, I then just did an audit of the full 300 shelf list and digitally moved through and just looked at what might need to be moved over. I created a spreadsheet with different tabs for the full shelf list, items to consider moving, and then items that were going to be moved all in different tabs. If I was going through the titles and I wasn't sure what I thought about if it should be moved or not, I just decided to consider it for moving because it's a lot easier when you get your hands on the books to know what you think might need to move over. And I didn't want to get, I would recommend not getting bogged down in a digital audit. If you're considering it, just kind of move it along to the next phase. And then when I actually pulled things, I kind of moved through the rest of it, a la carte at a time. So I didn't necessarily move through all of step 2 and then all of step 3. I worked with what I had instead of putting things back and forth. So I would just pull the things to consider. And if I needed help with reviewing them, I would use coworkers, but I just kind of started to dive in at that point. You can see my spreadsheets here of just sort of how I had it organized to move things along. And then once I started pulling things, I kind of just sorted anything I pulled into discard, move, or keep piles. So there were a lot of things that this was the perfect opportunity to weed because things were dated or, just no longer relevant or worth keeping in the collection or for whatever reason. So those things, I could just clear out of the way quickly. If something was staying in the 300s because it made sense to stay, then that just went back pretty quickly. And then anything that I was going to move, I looked into finding new call numbers and relabeling while I had it in hand instead of putting it back, just to kind of keep it as simple as possible and tracked my progress along the way. And as I said, I, just kind of built in new 900s numbers with what made the most sense. And over time, I noticed trends. but I didn't try to create a whole system out of whole cloth ahead of time. I kind of just worked with materials as I moved along. I did find some common practices that seemed to make the most sense as I was moving along. If this would be helpful for anyone, again, I'm happy to share it with people, but generally speaking, I just tried to focus on putting things in an area based on their new call number based on just when it happened and where it happened. There are, of course, call numbers for African-American history or focused on women's history. I tried not to use them too often because I didn't want to sort of other those items even within the history section. So if the book was specifically about, like if it was focused on slavery and it was focused on the creation of the African-American cultural group based on traditions, practices, things like that, then I would use that call number. But if it was based on like a rebellion on a plantation, then I would just put it in the, I would use a call number that was focused on where it happened and when, because then I was just considering it American history, if that makes sense. But so basically, I really tried to just generally use time and place for how to organize things as best as possible, more than topic. Other people might take a different approach. But I was trying to make sure to just kind of think of it as if it was American history for a lot of these items. There are other weird trends I noticed along the way, but I know this is sort of a brief meeting, so I don't want to get too bogged down in it. But if anyone has any questions about any more detailed things, I'm happy to go through them. And then basically, I just tracked, the old call number and the new call number. This helped me make sure in that last tab that I got to all the items that I wanted to move and that we moved them. And then I also was able to see, okay, what did I do with these call numbers? Because that way, if I was trying to remember, oh, where did I put the other civil rights history book, or where did I put the, where were the other books on Stonewall, or whatever, I kind of had something to look at. So overall, I would just say, obviously no system is perfect. I'm sure my corrections weren't, necessarily exactly always the right call. So the more people look at this and the more people start working on these things, I think the better it'll get. But I think any progress or improvement on these things is worth doing to make sure that we're being inclusive and accurate and keeping up with the times. And I also think in addition to other people making changes for these reasons before, we have had other reasons why we've made changes in the Dewey Decimal System based on new careers showing up or technology or different trends. So, I think it's worth doing, and there's precedent for taking things like this on. So I hope, everyone can dive in and build on this and, take it forward even more. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, or if any of those documents would be helpful, I'm happy to share them. Otherwise, I don't know if anyone has any more questions today.
That was really interesting. Thank you so much, Megan.
Sure.
Oh, here's a question.
I don't have those offhand. I could maybe reach out to my last library where we did it and see if they have any sort of specific numbers and documentation. I did notice a trend that our readers at that library, our history readers, tended to browse the new area, and they knew that history area of the new nonfiction, and they would just go to that panel. And so when a lot of those books started moving over, all of a sudden the books started doing better. So it wasn't that the readership didn't want to learn about different types of history. It was just that they didn't necessarily know it was being offered there. Yes, of course, I'm happy to share my contact information. I would say email is the best way to reach me. Obviously, phone calls would work too, but I think I'm probably fastest to get a hold of with email. So the digital audit took me about a week. I will say this was when I was at home during early COVID days. So it was kind of the perfect time to just go through a full 300 shelf list digital audit. So I think it took me a week or less. I wouldn't be surprised if in a normal workflow or more normal workflow time, it maybe would take a little bit longer just because people maybe can't take the same chunk of time to just sit with just that for a few days. If you are, great, but that part took me a week. I would say the rest of it, to actually get my hands on it and move things through, it went a lot faster than I expected. I think it took less than 2 months, I would say, for the bulk of it to get done. There were some pieces that trickled in over time, because if something was checked out, sometimes I had to place a hold and wait for it to even get back, so there were just like little bits that maybe dragged on beyond that. But I would say the whole thing took me probably less than 2 months. And that was what, with other projects and workloads going on along the way. So obviously, depending on the size of your collection and how many people are working on it, that could be vastly different everywhere, but that was my experience.
Okay, so thank you very much, Megan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we'll move on to our final presentation from Violet Jaffe and Adrian Galindo from Palatine, who are kind enough to talk to us today about Palatine's local subject headings for diversity.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I have a lot of microphone trouble, so I just wanted to make sure it was actually working before I started chatting. I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, it says it's disabled.
One moment, I'll make you a co-host.
Thank you. And I apologize in advance if this is getting repetitive, because I feel like I present about this everywhere. We just did an ILA presentation, and last year in the database management group, I presented about it. So if you've heard it all before, just have a rest. Have a cup of coffee. Let's see. No, okay. Let's see. Can you see it? Is that showing?
We see all your slides on the side.
How's that?
That's good.
fine.
We're there already. So the background real quick is we started 2 years ago now to do a diversity audit of our collection. And but we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just to do the audit, that we wanted to actually have a purposeful intention for where it was going to lead. So we wanted to do an in-house audit. We also did iCurate through Ingram. Our in-house audit was done by the individual selectors. It was about 1,700 items total from specific selected collections that we wanted to focus on. And we planned to perform the audits, collect the data, and then set goals for going forward. And then after 3 years, replicate both audits so we could see where we ended up. So in order to make progress and have some sort of measurable progress, we decided on adding subject headings for the points of diversity that we were measuring, because the LC subject headings are kind of catch-all in a lot of ways, and there were certain things that we wanted to measure that were not covered. So what we have up here was our diversity goals and instructions for the selectors. So when they order items, they're supposed to check for those points of diversity that we had measured, and then we created just simple abbreviations that they put in the notes fields of their orders, so that the catalogers can add that as a local subject heading. So it just says Palatine Library. No other CCS libraries have to. We don't expect anyone to join us. This is just for our staff use. And also we've heard from the youth staff that it's been helpful from creating lists for teachers in the area and stuff. So we set a goal of 25% of newly ordered titles to have some point of diversity, but we want to be realistic, and we don't want people to buy things of lesser quality just to meet some sort of quota, or to feel obligated if they're selection area happens to be, an adult nonfiction area that's really hard to find diverse material for, or something like that. So it's an overall library goal, not for each individual selector. So we do kind of understand that the teen fiction and things like that will buoy up some areas, like certain adult nonfiction areas that aren't going to have quite as much. We don't use every area and every format, so we're not doing anything for AV. I do know Midwest Tape has just started a diversity audit that you can sign up for with them for your AV. Personally, it's not something we're interested in at our library, but if anybody wants to do that, it basically works like I Curate. I think it's like $2,500 to do your collection. So it's not cheap. And then there's, the value of trying to figure out the diversity of a movie that's had hundreds of people work on it is a little tricky. And we did print, but also then audiobook and play away. So let's see if I can. Oh no, my slide won't advance. There we go. Okay. And we wanted the collections that we did fiction for all ages and all genres, youth picture book, youth easy reader, but not board books, biography for all ages, nonfiction for all ages, but only these particular Dewey numbers. We skipped the 4s and the 5s. So it is not every collection. And then these are the terms that we measured in the initial audit, and then also the terms that we use in our local subject headings. And then those are just the 2-letter abbreviations that the staff adds into their orders so that it's nice and clear. So you can see some of those things like own voices. It's not, it's become kind of controversial of using own voices, but that's more because of publishing and people, outing people or trying to market that. But obviously when we're using it kind of back of house in a library, we're using it for a different purpose, and we still found that to have value. And intersectional subject is one that's very tricky to try and capture with LC subject headings. So, and then this is just a guide that we share with all the selectors so that they have some parameters for defining these terms, because it's not really clear to everyone, and there can be some discrepancy, and we wanted to make sure that it was as consistent as possible. But we also found that some selectors felt very uncomfortable asking questions because they were worried they would come off as not like up to date and out of touch. So they were like, oh, I didn't want to ask exactly what neurodiverse meant, so having these clear definitions was really helpful to the selectors. We got a lot of good feedback on that. So that's basically what we did, why we did it, how we did it. Adrian, would you like to add anything about like the cataloging part of this particularly?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions about that part of the project, I'm here to answer them. It's pretty straightforward. Like Violet said, the selectors will have a note in the item record, and then the other cataloger, and I will add that to the bibliographic record.
Does anyone have any questions? I don't know that I can see the chat in this. Let me try to unshare. Stop share. Thank you very much.
Hey, yes, thank you both very much. It's very interesting. So then, if there are no more questions, we can move on to the CCS staff reports. Rachel?
Good morning, everyone. My full staff report is in the packet, but today I'm just going to summarize the key points. CCS staff have thoroughly tested version 7.3 on the training server and did find some bugs. Innovative had to reinstall the training server, so we will not be scheduling the upgrade of the production server until we've confirmed that Innovative fixed the problems that we caught. The cataloging training session for 7.3 functionality will be scheduled when we know that we can schedule the upgrade of the production server. The packet includes a list of cataloging and serials functions that are still missing from version 7.3. So I'm not going to review that whole list today, but you can refer to it in the packet. There's also a report on the new RDA toolkit that I provided to governing board that I placed in the packet. PCC is still testing the new toolkit and will not implement it before June 2023. And so CCS will not be implementing it before PCC does. And we'll have to wait until we hear more from PCC before we can utilize the new RDA toolkit. You can still utilize the original toolkit. It's available online still. And I'll cover more on this topic in the scrap report. And Virginia is next.
Okay. I also shared a small PowerPoint in the packet. Actually, I sent you an updated version because I changed one of the slides, but mostly it was about the subject headings. The big ones that changed was brothers and sisters is now siblings, and anything that used primitive, like primitive societies or primitive art, was changed mostly to prehistoric, though, and used the term there. And problem youth is now at-risk youth. There was a lot of headings updated because, you know, the royal family changed. The British royal family had some changes, and including, you know, now we've got good old Charles III and stuff like that. So I did have to do a lot of those changes. There was also Homosaurus update, the latest update. I think there was about 25 headings that I changed, and mostly they changed from like LGBTQ plus African Americans to backwards to African Americans, LGBT, so, or Asian gay Asians to Asian gay men. So basically they're moving things around like that. Other things I mentioned about genre indicators, most of them, remember, are going to use 7, but they're also use second indicator of 7. But remember, but there's actually 7 that still use the second indicator of 0. And I gave you a list there. Let's see if I have my own list here. Includes like large type print, Jewish fiction, Catholic fiction, feminist, young adult fiction, feminist fiction, chick lit, and big books. And actually, I might be talking to Scrap next year, our next meeting, about maybe we'll change those so they can use the same indicators of 7, so it would be easier for your cataloging. Stay tuned on that. And then the last few things, John from Indian Trails had a few reminders that he had sent me, including about how to use adaptations as a 655, and when to use like novelizations and TV tie-ins, especially in like a 730. And I gave you examples, and that in my PowerPoint, and that's going to be seen in like the packet or the extra little email I sent you. Any questions? Okay.
I don't see any. So thank you, Virginia. We can move on to the scrap report. Rachel?
Okay. I forgot to ask if there were any questions on my staff report. Were there any questions on my staff report? Okay, I'll move on to the scrap report. Scrap held a meeting on October 26th. Links to the recording and minutes are in the packet. Since the meeting, the executive committee approved the recommended revisions to the bibliographic input standards. Most of these suggestions were to clarify existing standards and to provide additional details. It also included the elimination of the 945 field that CAMM voted on last year. I've already updated the bibliographic input standards page of the wiki. Scrap will need to review the chart when the new RDA toolkit is implemented by PCC next fiscal year, because the RDA core has been eliminated with the new toolkit. And so the only core statements will be the LCPCC policy statements in the toolkit. 2 other pages have been updated. The chart of homosaurus terms to avoid has been updated because the editorial board added parenthetical qualifiers to a number of terms. So those terms that now have parenthetical qualifiers can now be used and will not be mixed up with their Library of Congress subject heading term that has different meanings. Scrap also discussed the target audience page based on the feedback from the CAMM meeting. And since the overlapping age ranges are considered a national standard, Scrap chose to revise the note on the target audience page on choosing between adolescent and juvenile to clarify it and provide additional information. So links to all of the relevant pages that have been updated are in the packet. Are there any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
In the discussion for juvenile versus teen in the fixed fields, where the ages overlap, it said to prefer to code it for the younger. But where they overlap tends to be around age 13, 14, and the materials that I get say like age 13 and up, which would make it not, appropriate for 8 and 9-year-olds. So that would be my concern with having that 13, 14 age overlap being coded for a younger audience when the things that I see tend to be skewing older.
Is there someone here that regularly catalogs material for youth that could answer the question? Because I haven't cataloged children's materials in a long time.
Hi, it's Brad from Cary. I do both juvenile fiction and YA. So while yes, they skew older, like 13 to 14, but the age range is delineated for teenager, doesn't start till what, 15 now or 14? But we always go the youngest age listed because, well, by that, if it's ages 8 to 13 or 8 to 12, we wouldn't just say that's if we used it, it wouldn't be like a pre-adolescent, it'd be a juvenile, but we go with the youngest one still. And I know that it's kind of a touchy, hard subject because some subjects are more clearly gauged towards older, but I mean, if everybody else has it as juvenile, kind of keeping it as a juvenile categorization makes it the best, especially for searching. If everybody else is in the juvenile section, it makes it harder for patrons to find it because if they try to limit, then by juvenile, if it's changed to adolescent, then they're not going to find it when searching in the pack.
Heather added in the chat that the code in the bibliographic record doesn't necessarily reflect where you will be placing it. So even if the item starts at 13 and you would place it in the juvenile target audience range, you can still place it in YA in your YA collection if you feel that's appropriate.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
I mean, in my case, and the thing that I'm bringing up, it's not about which collection we're shelving it in, because I understand we can shelve it wherever we want to. It's the actual content, where if the thing is saying it's for ages 13 and up, but our guidelines say decoded as J for juvenile, then people looking for actual juvenile materials aimed at, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds are going to be coming up with this thing that's intended for ages 13 and up, which may not be appropriate for 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds.
Well, there's also the reading level in the books that is added, I mean, in the records that is added. So I know that the youth services librarians do regularly reference the reading level. So it could potentially be a topic that we could add to the past agenda so that we could remind them of the target audience and the age ranges and how it functions from the cataloging side so that they can also utilize the reading level and demonstrate to the patrons how they can use the reading level when they search. Kathy asked if we could consider using the pre-adolescent coding. I think that we decided not to use that before I started working here due to how Polaris functions, and also that we wanted to limit the amount of target audience codes in the pack. But I think we may need to do we could do some more research in it to see if that would be something that we could start using. I'm not sure what the actual decision was based on, so I'll have to talk to Scrap about that again to see if they remember why that decision was made. John said that it has to do with the IPLAR statistics.
Hey, Rachel, this is Rebecca. I don't know if you can hear me. My headphones just died. I just stepped out of my office, but I can, if you repeat the question, I may be able to provide some additional history if needed.
Sure, it was a question on considering the use of pre-adolescent coding and why we decided to limit it to just juvenile and adolescent.
Oh, yeah, that was from database management. I believe that was a recommendation. They were looking at audience fields and yes, it was both IPLAR, but also I think just language in the pack because those appear. And I think that database management wanted to limit how many of them appeared because of, again, the sort of like technical language, like what is pre-adolescent when patrons are searching. So they thought bigger buckets would be better. But if you're looking for minutes and background, I would check database management.
Do you know when that decision was made, roughly?
I do not, but I bet Deborah could help you. Also, they're working on the roof in the office. So I'm going to go back on mute, but Deborah would have led that discussion.
Okay, does anyone else have more they'd like to add on this topic? If not, let's move on to business. Rachel?
All right, one moment. I would like to share my screen. So I had a request to provide more information on a report called BIBS with PDF and no 300E. This report is found in Web Reports. It is in the BIB and item management section. This is for a cleanup project that can be done whenever you have a bit of extra time. So it's not a priority at all and may seem a bit time consuming. The report is generated every Friday, but it does disappear after a couple of days, but moves to the archive. So if you don't see the report and you see an orange link, click on Display Archive and the list of reports will appear on the right-hand side in an archive, and you can download a report from the archive. The purpose of the report is to identify bibliographic records for audiobooks or videos that have an additional disc for a PDF on a separate disc that need to be cleaned up because they are missing a 300 subfield E. So this image is for a record that's cataloged correctly. The 500 field describes the PDF as a supplemental disc. And so the PDF is on a separate disk. And this is in the subfield E as one computer disk. So if this example was cataloged as 9 audio disks, instead of 8 audio disks plus 1 computer disk, then it should be corrected by changing the number of audio disks and adding the subfield E for the computer disk. There are also some records with 500 notes that say that it includes a PDF on the same disk as the audiobook or on a separate disk, and they've all been added to the same record. So I just wanted to confirm with everyone, because this is not actually on the cataloger's wiki page on whether it needs a separate record or not, that this needs a separate record so that we can add it to that wiki page. I thought it should be on a separate record, but since this has been in multiple records, I just wanted to confirm it in case there had been a decision previously that I was unaware of. So is there anyone that has any insight on why these were cataloged like this, or should we just add this to the wiki that it should be as separate records?
I would say to add it to the wiki for separate records, but make sure it's very clear what's intended.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking it should be considered separate records, but the case of the number of discs with PDFs wasn't actually on that page. So it does change the number of discs. So there are some cases though that in this report that not all records in the report will need to be corrected. The query that was used to identify the records looked at the 500 field for the word PDF. So it can't, obviously understand the difference between the different types of notes, whether it says it's on a separate record or not, because some just say it's supplementary material and the notes can be ambiguous. So you may find some on the report that will not need to be corrected, and some of the notes will seem ambiguous. So you may need to review the actual item to confirm whether you have one version or not. Like when these notes say it could be on the same disk or on a separate disk, you may need to count your disks and see which version you have to bring in the separate record. So you may find that this could be a bit of a time-consuming project. And I just want to reiterate, this is not a priority. If this is too time-consuming for you, you don't have any time, you don't have to focus on it. But if you just feel like you have a lack of work for some reason, like less books coming into catalog, feel free to take a look at this project and see if you can work on something. And if you go through the list and you find that there's nothing to change, that's really great. Let me know, and I can tell Bob that we don't need the report anymore, whether we just don't need it for your library or we don't need it for all libraries. I don't want to have an extra report on web reports that we don't need. So please do let me know if you feel it's not necessary. Kathy asks, is the data for each report run cumulatively? It is. So if the subfield E is not added because it's not necessary to add after you look at it, it will still be on the report. So I can bring up a copy of the report as an example. I just need to find it in my downloads folder. One moment. So one of the things that is useful about the report that will be helpful in the case that, because it is cumulative, is that it has the first available date and the creation date. So you can keep track of, which ones you've looked at. If you've gone through all the ones that have a creation date up to a certain point, then that anything new would be added, after 2021. So that should help you keep track of which ones you've looked at and which ones you haven't. Are there any other questions? Vicky says she worked on a couple of these and it seemed like most had the PDF on a disc that was part of the audiobook. So it may be that these have all been dealt with and don't need to be looked at anymore. So please do let me know if you think that this is not necessary anymore.
Okay, should we move on to reminders?
Okay, one moment. I have to get out my other screen. We do have one reminder for the day. The link in the packet is for this page called the RDA cheat sheet. And the reminder is for the 4K Blu-rays. So there are a lot of different types of Blu-rays that all use the same TOM for Blu-ray. And it's really important to pay attention to these 3XX fields and to make sure you add the 347 for 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. And this is important in order to distinguish the different Blu-ray record types, because there's the regular Blu-ray, the 3D Blu-ray, which needs the 3.3x for the 3-dimensional moving object instead of the 2-dimensional moving object. And the 4K Blu-ray needs that 347 for 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray to make sure that we can all identify the different types of Blu-rays records in a standardized manner. So if you haven't looked at this page recently, I highly recommend taking a look at all of the different 3XX fields in it. It's really helpful to be able to review this page and then quickly identify what additional 3XX fields are missing from your records.
Excellent. That's a really great reminder, Rachel. Thank you. So now I'm going to open it up to the technical services open forum. If anyone has anything else they'd like to discuss regarding cataloging, acquisitions, or processing.
Hi, this is Joe at the Huntley Library. I had a question from one of my staff members that just came up. A of when do we start using, so like for a series where a well-known author has passed on and somebody else starts writing the books, when do we start using the second writer as the main entry versus the creator? The examples that I was given was Clive Cussler, the new one, Sea Wolves. The regular print has the second author as the main entry, and the large print has Cussler still as the main entry. And they had looked at some other series like the Robert Ludlum ones, the Bourne books, and those books are all, the main entries are under the new writers, and there's more than one of those. So I don't know if that's a different case. I tried looking through the wiki and a few other things, and I wasn't seeing anything so that I can give them a correct answer. So I thought I'd bring it to the group to see what's the correct way to be doing these.
I believe that according to RDA, the new writer is supposed to be in the 100 field for any new editions that are made, like textbook editions. So I would think that would apply to the same situation.
Okay, then I guess we need to go back and fix Clive Cussler, because all of them up to this new one have Clive Cussler for both of them, the regular print and large print. But this newest one, it was the regular print was changed to the new author, and the large print still has Cussler.
I think if he's dead already, I haven't
Yes,
been
he
paying
died in
attention
2020.
in 2020, then I
Mhm.
would definitely say that anything published after he's dead should be attributed to
To the new author. Okay,
new author.
okay, so I will.
Rach, I'm sorry, that this is Tammy over at Grays Lake. And we put the series information on our books. So we've been trying to keep series work together. So when we've come across this, we've been just going with the 800 for cutting. You know, if they're still using the 800 for the series information, we've been going along with that to do our cutter so that all the whole series is on the shelf together for the patrons. So
Doing that too at Huntley. We still put them all with Cussler. And again, this is a newer cataloger, and was asking about why was one Cussler, one is the DeBrule for this new title, and that, but all the other books, even though he died in 2020, are still under Cussler as the 100.
My experience has only been based on cataloging new editions when the author changes. So if anyone else has any other experiences, feel free to share how you would suggest handling it.
well, Rachel, this is Tammy again. It's okay with CCS, correct, that we do use different authors as a cutter?
Yeah.
Like I'd go with the 800. That's okay. So
The only complaint that I've heard is that there are cases when public services or circulation staff or anyone doing any shelving would be confused, like between like the pick list and what the pick list might say and what the classification might say. So I've heard of cases where books are sent back to cataloging to make sure that the spine label matches the author field.
sure. Yeah, I usually put a non-public note in the item record for our staff just to, if they were like, oh, what's going on here, they can double check it through that.
So Jamie added in the chat that he agrees that whoever actually wrote the book is in the 100. And Virginia just wanted to add a reminder in the chat to add the 700 for the original author.
Yeah, and I never change the 100 and I always make sure there's a 700. And there's always an 800, obviously. So,
I do have one point to make. Well, because he did have a number of books that were in the process of being written when he died. So just because it was published after his death doesn't mean he didn't have any role in writing them. So he could still be the 100 still. Unlike Ludlum, who's been dead for quite a while, he's clearly not had any role in writing them. There still could be parts that he was still the author of. So that's why there's like a book in 2021 that he is still the main author of, because he probably did write the majority of it. And then whoever they brought in was just the finisher, right? I mean, would he still not be considered the author if that's what it says on the title, title page? Or
Mom, the one that I looked at that they came to ask me about, the title page is not clear. It really, it says Clive Cussler on the top, and then there's the title, and then underneath is the Jack DeBrule. And when I went to go look for the previous title, they weren't in, so I wasn't able to look at those title pages to see if there was anything different of why. And again, and I think the big flag is that the regular print is under Clive Cussler and the large. Sorry, that's the wrong way. The regular print is under Jack DeBrule and the large print is under Cussler.
does OCLC have different records with different 100s in it?
I will admit, I didn't look at that. It's just, I knew the meeting was this morning, so I just thought I'm just gonna throw it out and ask. I will go back and double check that. And again, there's a lot of people who already added their titles and nobody changed either one. So that was, was kind of leading to some of the confusion.
looking at some of the covers of these books, there is a definite point where it switches from it saying Clive Cussler and the author to saying by the second author instead of his name. So like there's one that's the final option that says Clive Cussler and Boyd Morrison. And then at a certain point it changes to saying Clive Cussler on the top, and at the bottom says by Mike Madden or by Dirk Cussler. So I think that there, or the one that you were talking about, Seawell does say at the bottom of the cover by Jack DeBrule. So I think those ones which should be under the second author or the DeBrule or whoever wrote it instead of him. That'd be my guess.
Michelle added in the chat that the Clive Cussler across the top is like a brand.
Yeah, like Tom Clancy. There's so many books of him that are Tom Clancy's whatever, but he's been dead for a while now, but it's still, that's the brand now.
And Jamie added that the list of titles in the series or the list of titles by Jack DeBrule list the title as Clive Cussler, the Sea Rolls, like the name is part of the title.
I did go and look in OCLC, and this particular one is done both ways. There's a bunch of records with DeBrule and there's a bunch of records with Cussler, just looking at the hit list without going in and starting to look at it. And in OCLC, the large print was done one way and the regular print is done the other way. That's not helpful either.
Anita added that the author's estate contracts with an author to continue the characters and storyline. So if that's the case, then it would not have been written when he was alive and might just be sort of like a tie-in.
And then
So I think it sounds like DeBrule should be in the 100.
Okay.
if that's the case.
Yeah, I'll look at that. And then on the regular, no, the large print that has DeBrule as the author. The one that has DeBrule as the author has a 500 note that it's based on characters created by, and then the other one doesn't have that note either. So there's a lot of differences, and so it was just causing confusion.
Okay, well, thanks for bringing that up. I don't know if we've come to a total resolution here, but hopefully we will soon. Does anyone else want to mention anything?
Hi, Tammy again at Grays Lake.
Hi,
We've recently started working with Baker and Taylor's sustainable shelves, and we're having trouble coming up with a good workflow. So our department manager said if anybody works with sustainable shelves and has a good workflow, could you please contact Carlin DeThorne at grayslake.info. We'd appreciate that. And then we also wanted to announce that Kelly Webster, who's been with Grays Lake Library for 17 years, and she's currently our resource department supervisor, is retiring. And we wish her all the best, and we're going to miss her a lot.
Can you tell us more about what sustainable shelves is?
It's when you're done reading your books from your collection, you send them a report of which items were on your reading list, and they'll let you know if any of them would have, they'll send you a list back of ones that they value, and they'll pay you for those books when you ship them back to them, and which books you could just put fair game or send to the friends or whatever, recycle. So we're having a little difficulty between using Simply Reports, getting the right fields to Baker and Taylor. I'm not really sure on the end of the business of that, so I don't quite understand it, but I know they're having trouble. Like, we came up with this new workflow, and then all we got back on the list were ISBNs and no titles. So it was very difficult to, well, not very difficult, but time consuming to sort the physical books into which, if they were going to be valued or not. So if anybody had a good workflow, if anybody's using them, I don't know.
Well, if you have just a list of ISBNs, you could ask Bob to help create a custom report for you with the fields that you need in it.
Okay. I'll let
And you can
them
just
know
submit a
that.
help desk. You can just submit a help desk ticket.
Okay. And since we
Yeah.
just started it, Kathy from McHenry, we've only done it maybe 2 times now, so I couldn't tell you what a typical value would be yet.
This is Rebecca. I don't know if anyone from Glencoe or Evanston is on the call today, but they are both using sustainable shelves, and they had their sort of earnings applied to their collection HQ payments. So one is I could probably find out how much that was, Kathy. But 2, I know that they've been doing it for a while. Evanston had it applied last year as well. So they've been doing it for at least 2 years.
Well, thank you. I'll let our Heartland know to reach out to them.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other announcements anyone would like to share? I'm not seeing any. So if nobody else has any, then I guess it would be time to adjourn. So our next meeting will be Wednesday, February 15th, 2023 via Zoom at 9:30 a.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Tammy, I motion to adjourn.
Excellent. Do I have a second? Karen, seconded. So we will adjourn this meeting at 10:45 a.m. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in February.